like to extend a thank you just to the Hills Library for inviting me to speak tonight and for the opportunity to talk a little bit about our program and see if we can generate more interest, and for those of you who are participating, to act as ambassadors and try to get more people signed up. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the situation of solid waste in Massachusetts in general. Can anyone hear me?
Louder.
Talk about the situation of solid waste in Massachusetts in general, and talk about why we're taking a look at food waste as our next initiative. Brace yourself, this next slide's not so pretty. So this is how I kind of characterize our Massachusetts solid waste situation. This gentleman's belly is meant to represent how much waste that we're actually generating in Massachusetts, and his shirt is meant to represent how much waste we can actually process and handle in Massachusetts. About 25% of the waste that's generated in Massachusetts is actually exported to other states. And those states, it gets exported to those other states because we don't have enough landfill capacity or enough incinerator capacity. And so basically it's going to where land is cheaper. And so it's going north and it's going west. It's going as far as Pennsylvania and Ohio by rail. And so I see this as a problem, and I think food waste is one of the ways that we can start to tackle that. We basically have, again, that 25% represents about 1.4 million tons of waste a year. And by 2021, there's 4 more landfills that are scheduled to close, which will create another need for 1 million tons to go somewhere. We'll be looking for a home. So unless we reduce those numbers, we are not going to, our trash is just going to get more expensive. So where should we focus for this? Well, this is what's called a solid waste management hierarchy. So reduce, reuse, recycle, that's pretty much the hierarchy. So we start with source reduction, go to recycling, composting, energy recovery, meaning that you'd be burning the waste for energy, and then lastly, treatment and landfilling. One thing I would just want to say is this doesn't need to be just a presentation. If you have questions, ask them at any time. It can be a conversation. So at any time, if you've got questions about any of this, please ask.
I have a question. So when we ship the waste to other states, do we pay them for that?
We do, absolutely.
Yeah.
So currently, our waste in Wellesley goes to what's called the Fitchburg landfill, which is technically in Westminster. It's owned by Waste Management and the town of Fitchburg, but it's located in Westminster, Massachusetts. Prior to this latest fiscal year, we were sending it all the way to Seneca Meadows, New York. So near Syracuse, and it was travel 380 miles to get there, and that was because at the time that was the least expensive way of us disposing of trash.
And that's going one dumpster at a time?
It's going in a 100-yard trailer.
Yeah.
So essentially the compactors, 100-yard trailer. A lot of what we do at the RDF is take smaller amounts and put them into larger amounts. So we take the compactors and the bulky waste containers that are at the RDF. Those get dumped onto a tipping floor, loaded into 100-yard trailers. It's more efficient to move it. Cubic yards. Yeah. Okay. So where should we focus? Part 2. This is what's called the waste composition, and that tells us what is in municipal solid waste. So municipal solid waste is a term that after you take the recycling and everything out of the normal streams, what is it still comprised of? And you'll notice that there's items that are on there that you would think of as recyclable, but frequently are not. So you might have like the coffee cups in back, the water cups that are there that are lined in plastic. They're a combination of plastic and paper, so that's what makes up some of these. And also, of course, if somebody isn't recycling, it's contributing to this as well. So one thing that you'll notice about this, after taking a little bit of a look at it, is that we recycle these items at the RDF, and we recycle them very well. So whether it's glass, wood, textiles, paper, yard waste, metals, plastics, all except for this one right here, food waste. So food waste, again, for waste characteristics, take 12.5 as an estimate. But once you actually look at just the material that we're generating, it's typically between 20 and 30% of the waste stream. So there's some opportunities there to really focus on. The other priorities that EPA and DEP have are also with construction and demolition material, but we're really focusing on residential solid waste, municipal solid waste. So where we focus, part 3. So once we're starting to take a look at food and see what we can do about it, there's a priority as well. There's a hierarchy that's associated with that. It's also reduce, reuse, recycle. So the first thing that we're doing is taking a look and see And I should say that this is across the board, so this is from the growing of materials from the farm all the way to the table and beyond. So there's substantial food waste on farms themselves, as well as throughout the rest of the transportation, storage, usage, and it's estimated that about 40% of the food that's generated in America is actually thrown out. It's not eaten. And when you look at that with contrast, you have a question.
How is the amount of waste that is recycled compared to the amount of food waste that is proportionately produced? And how toxic is the food waste that goes through a disposal or whatever all other means of dispersal? How does that affect the environment, or is there a problem?
I might not have a complete answer to your question.
Yeah.
Especially when toxicity, I'm not sure if you're talking about the fertilizers that are used to grow it, but if you're looking at
The
sort
way
of
food
overall.
is disposed of now, what is the principal problem with disposing of food waste
Sure.
now?
So I would characterize the principal problems as, one, it can be used better, for one.
Use better.
So you can generate energy, you can generate compost that can be used, low-level fertilizers that can all be used by food, for that, as well as feeding people, of course. And so that's part of what the hierarchy gets to as well. And I would say in terms of getting rid of it, once you aren't reusing it and using it for something better, when it goes into a landfill, it produces methane. So depending on the quality of that landfill, it may or may not be capturing substantial amounts of that methane, so it's contributing to global warming. And if you're putting it down your garbage disposal, it's not great. Depending on where it's going, it could be okay. You might be able to get a little bit of energy from it if it's going to a wastewater treatment facility in an anaerobic digester. I'll get into explaining that in a little bit. But it can clog up the sewer system. That creates more wear and tear on that infrastructure, so it can be problematic at going down the garbage disposal too. So as part of the source reduction, so yep, it's looking to see what can we not generate as waste, again from the farm all the way through the entire process. Once we've reduced that, and we're not buying as much, we're buying appropriately, we've got appropriate meal sizes, then we want to use it to feed hungry people, feed animals, move down from the most preferred to the least preferred, industrial uses that's generating energy from it, composting, and then landfill and separation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that are going on in Wellesley right now related to these activities. So in about 2014, we formed a 3R working group, which is a collaboration between the Department of Public Works, the Sustainable Energy Committee, and the Natural Resources Commission. And we said, why don't we start to work together on our initiatives? The Sustainable Energy Commission is looking to reduce greenhouse gases overall. Obviously, as a recycling facility that we're promoting reduce, reuse, recycle, we've got a need there to contribute. And the Natural Resources Commission is responsible for all the parklands, and so they want to see reductions in those greenhouse gases too. So we started working together, and right around the same time, we decided to join what's called WasteWise. And WasteWise is an EPA program, United States Environmental Protection Agency program, that is also supported by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. And it's a volunteer program where you basically, you register, and you could be an individual, you could be a business, you could be a municipality, and you state your goals for waste reduction, and then you report on those goals for waste reduction. And it's a way of creating sort of a larger discussion and a larger collaboration and communication about initiatives to reduce carbon footprint and waste overall. One of the things that we're doing, so some of the initiatives related to those two groups, the sort of the WasteWise and the 3R group, are sort of in order here. One is the Food Recovery Challenge. So some of you may be familiar with the program that went on at Bates School. They also signed up as a WasteWise partner and and they contributed into what's called the Food Recovery Challenge. And basically what they did a waste audit on their cafeteria. So they took a look at all the waste that was being generated, they did a characterization study on that waste, and then looked for opportunities to reduce that waste. And they were recognized famously for that, actually. So that's sort of on the source reduction side. Food for free is sort of the next step there. So what they doing Food for Free. Food for Free is an organization in Cambridge, and what they do is sort of the next step down the line. They take the cooked food that you couldn't serve, that was already served or presented to people, and they try to rescue some of that and get that to hungry people as well. And so it was, I think I mentioned, there's the 40% of food that's grown in the United States that's thrown away and never eaten. And there's about a little bit less than 15% of people in the United States who are food insecure. And so you think that we should be able to solve this problem a little bit better and get those numbers down. But Food for Free, what they do is, for decades, people have been taking restaurants, and of course, supermarkets have been taking the prepared foods, the raw foods, the table scraps and leftover things, and getting that to soup kitchens, shelters. But not everyone has access to a kitchen. And so this is really where Food for Free has had this niche where they're taking cooked food, collecting it, putting it into meal-sized containers so that someone can microwave it and heat it up. So there's food populations that might be placed in but motels, hotels, where all they have is a mini fridge and a microwave. So it's trying to get some food to those populations. So in Cambridge, they have a distribution network through the schools, and they've got a number of institutions that they collect the material from in order to make those portions and get it out to their populations. And so we started to look at, can we replicate that in sort of the Metro West area? So in conjunction with this, some of you may be familiar that there's waistbands. So waistbands are commonly recyclable items or toxic items that we want to keep out of the waste stream. And they started in the early 90s with things like yard waste, general recyclables, mercury-containing products, televisions. And basically the state put bans and said, you cannot throw these away. You can throw away little bits of them, but you can't throw away a lot of it. And so food waste in 2014 became a waste ban for generators of a ton of waste or more a week. And so restaurants, supermarkets, colleges and institutions are all susceptible to this food waste ban. And so there's pressure on the institutions. There's concurrent with that, infrastructure started to grow, as Mass DEP typically does when they institute one of these bans. They basically say, okay, the ban's effective now, but we're not going to enforce it too much. We're going to let the infrastructure build. We're going to let people adjust to the new reality. And so since 2014, we started to see transportation infrastructure for dealing with food waste start to grow. We start to see more farms are getting into it, and there's farms that are as far away as Maine that are willing to come down here to bring waste up to Maine. And we've also seen an influx of what are called anaerobic digesters and companies investing in that infrastructure. And so with the discussions, we've had discussions with the area colleges and Food for Free. What we did through this collaborative is we started to really have discussions about how do we do this in our area. And so in collaboration with the health department and food guidelines, we're really fortunate that we're pretty much in our backyard. Harvard School of Law has basically a program around food and food health law. And so they were a great resource. We took all these groups onto tours in Boston and Cambridge to see how they're doing this program at Harvard, because they're doing it there. And it started to make a reality. So luckily, we're now participating in that program, and that's the Wellesley Public Schools, that's Wellesley College, Babson College, Olin, and Bentley. Those are the ones that are participating in it right now. So right now, all that material is going back into Cambridge and getting distributed there, and we're hopeful that we can actually create that sort of infrastructure out here, because right in our backyard here at Mass Bay, they did a survey that 18% of their students identify themselves as food insecure. So it's a problem that we have not only in the cities, but we have in the suburbs too. And last on the list there, as we sort of move down, we took a look at feeding animals, but the farms are so specific as to what they'll feed their animals because they're interested in their nutrition. It's not just scrap. So we didn't feel that was a great match for our program. So then we move next down the list, which is industrial uses. And as is typical, when we get past the fun stuff that everybody can do, the easy stuff, then it comes to the RDF. So that's when it comes across my desk. So why are we doing this? We think that locally generated sustainable energy is the best thing that we could do with our food waste. And so that's really what we wanted to take a look at and see if we could accomplish. And achieve this vision, if you can see it, it's from Back to the Future. It's at the end of the movie, the first one where Doc is powering the DeLorean on food waste. So he's got his beer can there, but food waste and food scraps and generating it into energy. And typically, I get reactions at this point said, really, you're going to ask us to sort another thing out at the RDF? Do we have enough already? So I wanted just to take a second to talk about the dual models of source separation and single stream recycling. Single stream recycling is obviously fantastic on a transportation standpoint. There's very sophisticated machinery to separate out the recyclables into the different streams and take a lot of the effort out of it. But I sort of I liken it to this picture here. The reason I include that is because, if I told my kids, yeah, put away the dishes and the silverware, and that's how they did it, it would be quick, it'd be easy, but it doesn't make it right. And it doesn't make sense a lot of times. So some of the downsides in the single stream and why I think the source separated model is superior is because of the contamination rates that happen in single stream. We've got a lot of wishful recyclers. We've got the quality of the machinery is really specific. It's been improving. These are called material recovery facilities, so everything goes over it, and a series of eddy currents and magnets and laborers and optical sorters will separate everything out as best as it can. But you end up with glass in the fiber. You end up with plastics that it's very expensive to separate out, and so they're typically contaminated. So the quality of the fiber is really poor, and that's what we've been shipping to China. And you might all be familiar with the import restrictions that are happening in China. So this past fall, they lowered their threshold from 2% to half of 1%. And the material recovery facilities aren't really set up to meet those standards. And we all sort of tend to blame China, but China is not responsible for our waste, and we are responsible for our waste. So we need to clean it up. And source separation, especially once you have a good education program to go along with it, because that's critical. If you can get a clean product, it maintains its recyclability, because a lot of times the material will go somewhere, and if it's a junk product, it'll get rejected and eventually thrown away. So it increases its recyclability. It's higher generated revenue because it's a cleaner product and doesn't require secondary handling once it gets to the recycler. And also, we are able to withstand these market fluctuations like we're seeing right now with China, where the Chinese import restrictions are definitely depressing overall market value, but our primary concern is being able to continue to move the product and continue to have it recycled. Revenue is sort of the third thing that we take a look at. And so we've seen this a couple of times over the last 5 years, but we've been able to really withstand these market fluctuations and get plenty of revenue from our product.
Can I ask what percentage, once it's all been through the recycling separator, what percentage gets shipped to China or chucked away as not used, do you know?
So there's a couple things. So there's overall the contamination rates that go to the material recovery facilities, and those are typically between 10 and 20%. So of that single stream bin, once it's gone through their whole facility, they still have the waste that's left over, that's not recyclable. That's typically 10 and 20%. Then of that material, called the paper that comes out of there, mixed residential paper, that's a product that some mills in the United States want to use and some don't. They're not built for it. So China has invested in some of those mills that can handle it, but now that they're not buying that material, it's creating a glut of product over here, depressing values overall. And so they're just simply rejecting it. I don't know what their contamination rate would be, but again, they're typically supposed to be about 2% going through the MRF, and so if their threshold is supposed to be 2%, that's the answer to that. So again, at the RDF. So back to the food waste. So we've started a pilot with 300 households, and we wanted to limit the pilot to 300 households for a couple of reasons. One, we only had a certain budget for this, and this was paid through by Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection and grants. And we really wanted to see how much food waste would people generate per household. EPA has estimates, everybody has estimates, but we want to see in Wellesley what would it really turn into. And so to understand costs and what participation would look like, we did limit the participation to 300 households for 3 months. Then we needed to really decide where to go. We knew that we wanted to target anaerobic digestion, but we hadn't fully explored the infrastructure, so we wanted to maintain that hey, maybe the farms would be a solution for us. So we tried to design the program with some flexibility, but ultimately decided to go with anaerobic digestion. I should say one of the other reasons that we decided to do anaerobic digestion is because we want to complement what people might be doing in their backyards already. So fully encourage people to compost in their backyard. It's rewarding, it's educational, you can use it yourself, but there's obviously some items that you might not want to put in your backyard composting. So by going with an anaerobic digester model, it allowed us to take meats, it allowed us to take bones and shells and any food product. So we wanted to complement what people were doing. And one of the benefits, and to encourage everybody to sign up, even if you're doing your backyard composting, bring us your other stuff. Even if you're doing backyard composting and maybe you don't do it in the winter. So it's another opportunity for us to continue to get some good energy from that material. And our next steps are really how do we scale? How do we scale up? How do we get more participation? And interestingly enough, more participation actually brings the cost down because we have fixed transportation costs. So each time we deliver a truck into Boston or to a location, we're paying the driver per hour, we're paying the truck per hour, the truck cost per hour. And if it's transporting air, that doesn't do us any good. We really want to make sure that that truck is as full as possible. So that brings the cost down. And in looking at that, we wanted to take a look at a make versus buy decision. Does it make sense to have someone else come service it, or does it make sense for us to deliver it ourselves? Yeah. And what we've learned is that delivering it ourselves brings the cost down substantially. So we want to talk a little bit about what's actually happening after you've dropped it off in the facility. I'm just going to switch sides here. So think of this as the RDF. You've brought it already, and we have source separated organics. At that point, it's going to what is called a depackager and a slurry maker. So it goes through a process that's really designed to take full crates of material that's gone bad. It could be juice boxes, it could be yogurt containers, it could just large amounts of packaged material that's gone bad. And so it basically shreds it up and creates a slurry from that. And that's in Charleston right now. And then it goes through transport, it's made into a slurry, and then it goes to a wastewater treatment facility. So right now our material is going to what's called the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District, and it gets mixed with their wastewater. And from there, it goes into an anaerobic digester, captures the methane that comes out from the decomposition, and then gets burned to get turned into electricity. And that's the entire process that happens. There are some residuals that happen at the end, either removing the material, so if there's plastic packaging or anything like that that's in the material, that'll get taken out. And then at the end, there's a biosolid, so after it's broken all the material down, there are residuals which they apply as low-level fertilizer on farms. So we're really capturing a lot of energy from this food that's just been wasted and going to the landfill before. And so per month right now, with the 300 households, we're generating 5 million BTU a month. That sounds like a big number. It's not a big number. So 5,000 BTUs a month, there's somewhat equivalent to 1,000 kilowatt hours, which is basically the power of one house for 1 month. So 300 houses, powering a house a month. But that's only with 3% of households actually participating in the program. So big picture, if we had all of town coming, we could do about 30 houses a month. And so I think only 30 houses a month. That's still 30 houses a month of all our electricity use, average American families. And I think that that's very substantial. So here's sort of the ask of why I'm here. I'm here to obviously educate, answer any of your questions, but we really want to increase participation. And so we've opened it up to another 300 households. We've had about 150 sign up since we opened it up. We'd like to have another 150. I'd like to have another 8,000, honestly. So if you're interested in signing up and it's something that you're ready to do, we've got sign-up forms here. We've got literature if you want to take it away with you. So we also have a sign-up form on our website. If you have a smart device, you could just print the camera at the QR reader. It'll take you right to that form. So please sign up and, yeah, let's ask
How do
some
we
more
drop it
questions.
off? Sorry, this is totally new for me.
Thank you very much. I forgot, so the starter kits. So with the starter kits, there's a couple elements to it. One, there's your countertop bin. And this is a relatively inexpensive countertop bin. They make much nicer ones, stainless steel with charcoal filters that might work better for someone than this. Also with it are the compostable bags. So you put this on your counter or on your sink, you put your food waste in here, you tie it off, and the other components of the starter kit, this bucket, and I think most importantly, this lid. So of course, one of the first things that we always thought about when we were considering food waste programs is, are people in Wellesley going to really bring their food waste to the RDF? They're going to put it in their luxury cars and bring it to the RDF. Doesn't seem to make sense. And the first retort to that is always, well, they're doing it already. They're just putting it over there instead of over there. So let's see how easy we can make it to transport. And obviously we wanted people to have a pleasant experience, as much pleasant experience as possible. So this has got a nice screw top lid. And so you can fit about 3 bags in here. One of the things I also want to communicate is this part can pop off and fit on a larger bucket. So if you have a 5-gallon bucket or even up to an 8-gallon bucket, this lid can fit on it. We decided with this size because we didn't want it to be too heavy for people. That was one of our concerns. But we're thinking about potentially buying some 5-gallon buckets and doing a little trade-in program or something like that. And so there's an area at the RDF.
Where's the audio?
So the RDF is on 169 Great Plain Avenue, Route 135 on the border of Needham. So if you're headed,
I'm totally new as you put
No,
it.
if you're headed towards Needham, you'll see the sign for entering Needham. We're just on the right before that.
I'll get the address.
Do you have any idea on the first 300 of the families that have been fully participating? Like, are they 2 or 3 adults or larger families? I mean, do you have a
We do. That's one of the questions that we asked during the sign up.
Yeah.
I want to say it was average, like 4 was I think the average.
4.
4. We definitely had people with 2, definitely had people with 6.
Okay.
We saw an average of 4. I should also say that we saw, EPA estimates 4.6 pounds per household per week, and it really fluctuated a lot, but we're a little bit higher than that. Granted that we started around Thanksgiving, that was very high, and we've seen some drop-offs during the colder weather as well.
So what are we shipping out on a weekly basis, or is it monthly that the truck goes to Charleston?
So we had a couple different pickups. One week, when we scheduled pickups with a hauler, we wanted to be regular and not to have to worry when they came in, so they were coming weekly.
Weekly, okay.
We're blessed with cold weather where odors haven't been an issue and decomposition hasn't been an issue. So we anticipate needing to do it more frequently in the warmer weather, especially just the heat of the summer. But as we're moving it, if we move to a model where we're moving it ourselves, we have a lot more control over when we do that. We can store it if the weather's cooperating. So, one of the scenarios is sort of the ideal, if we were moving it every week, we would want about 1,000 households to sign up. That puts our costs of what are called tipping fees, which is what do you have to pay to actually drop it off somewhere, our transportation and our labor, that will equate to what we're actually paying for trash. So I'd really like to get it cheaper than trash. Even if we're not, we're doing something better with it than throwing in landfill, and trash costs are only going to go up because we've got landfills closing and the landfills that are closing again, and that's only going to get more expensive. We happen to be in a very favorable trash contract right now.
Just a quick one. If it takes off and you get enough households, are you likely to maybe do drop-off points, not just at the RDF, so that people can drop it off in Wellesley Town or Wellesley Hills, or
It's a great question.
it would be so much more convenient for people, more likely to do it?
I agree with you. The difficulty in having those other drop-off points is that you really just can't have a point. You have to have a material handling facility. So we'd have to get that area permitted by the state and have all the same reporting requirements that we do at the RDF. So it becomes a solid waste handling facility at that point. So it's more complicated, unfortunately, than just putting a container there.
Is there any food that you're not allowed to put in there or you don't want in there?
All food is welcome.
All food is welcome.
If it's, and they.
But not bones, right? Or
No, bones are fine.
Bones, okay.
Bones are
I
fine.
think I've done bones.
Yes.
Were you surprised at how much food waste there was? You don't even have the statistics, but when I read 300 families in a ton a week, it was like, wow.
Yeah. I wasn't surprised about the amount because they were equal to what standard estimates are. I think what I was most surprised about was the enthusiasm that people brought to the program and how good it made them feel. And also I was surprised at how good it made people who I wouldn't classify as green feel. You know, I have a coworker who was working with the program who would not, you know, self-identify as a greenie. And he said, it just feels good because I know that I'm doing something better than throwing it away. So that's what I was really surprised about.
One thing-
Yeah.
One
Sorry,
thing
Priscilla.
that I'm not sure if you mentioned, but the whole idea that the garbage is getting taken out of the regular waste makes our waste more valuable, right? I mean, isn't that the idea too, that once we get the garbage out of our waste, it's a little bit easier to dispose of, more amenable?
It's certainly less putrid.
Less.
Putrid?
I said stupid. Yeah.
So when I entered the trash building, yeah, if everyone was participating, it
Yeah.
wouldn't ever stop.
Yes.
That would be fantastic. I'm not sure it makes our material more valuable.
Well, not valuable, but easier to dispose of, you know, going into a landfill.
I think if we were to get the entire town to participate and we really didn't have any food waste in the trash, I think the one area that I would notice it the most is when someone accidentally loses a valuable in the trash and we take the time to go pick that trash and try to get out of it. That would make that experience a little bit more pleasant.
Well, it lessens the trash, obviously.
It does lessen the
takes weight
trash.
off, yeah.
That's right. I'm also happy to answer questions in general about the RDF if people have questions that they've been waiting to ask. Or
What happens with just basic trash at the RDF, the stuff that's just dumped in the bins?
Yep. So waste in Massachusetts and in the world, there's basically two options for getting rid of trash. You burn it or you bury it. And so at the RDF, we go through trash contracts where we do competitive bidding so that we can lower the trash costs as much as possible for the residents. So currently we're in a contract where it's landfilled. So again, what happens, you drop it off in the compaction containers. You see our big trucks that pick up those containers and they essentially drive them to one of the white buildings and dump it on the floor. From there, we have an excavator that picks up that material and loads it into a 100-yard trailer. And then that trailer leaves every day to go up to a landfill in Westminster, Mass, called the Fitchburg landfill, where it dumps there.
So that isn't sorted at all then?
Correct, it is not sorted. The only thing that happens is if we notice that there's a substantial recyclable in there, we will take it out. So that's part of our
What would that be?
responsibilities. Well, we take, so for instance, if you have the bulky waste area, if someone were to put a television in there, and we saw that on the floor, we're required to take that out, or an appliance or any major recyclable.
My understanding is that for the entire country, it's like a 35 square mile area of landfill per year. Is that apocryphal? Is that
I
accurate?
don't have that
The
figure.
entire country?
Yeah.
That sounds small, doesn't it?
I think one interesting one around food waste and sort of arable land, I saw the other day at the Green Collaborative meeting. I don't know how many people attend that. No, I'm sorry, it was the Wellesley Green School Summit. They had a visual where they had the earth and they, you know, so it's all to get us down to, you know, what percentage of land is arable. And so 3/4 is covered with water, then you've got, you know, the pavement that's covered, you've got mountains, and so you get down to 1/32 of the surface area of the earth that's actually arable land. So I thought that was interesting.
What's the plastic bag situation these days?
It's a great question too. So plastic bags at the RDF, we want you to throw them away. If you're in a single stream program, they want you to throw them away. So the only programs that I've seen that are successful require a tremendous amount of labor, sort of a full-time staff person inspecting bags. Even then, I've talked to buyers of plastic bags and film. Film is sort of the industry term for bags. And the real successful programs are dealing with when you've got a pallet that's shrink wrapped and taking that material. So pre-consumer. I've yet to talk to anyone who actually is recycling post-consumer plastic bags.
In the UK, they've put a tax on plastic bags, and you have to pay 5p to have a plastic bag, and it's become almost socially unacceptable to have plastic bags now, and everyone takes their own. It's amazing the difference.
That's great.
That's what we should do, really.
Yeah, reusable bags are the way to go, obviously. as long as you use them and reuse them.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question, but is it true that, it's better to, open and empty the plastic bags rather than to throw out the garbage bag whole and?
Oh, absolutely. To reuse a plastic bag rather than throwing away,
and
certainly.
empty the trash.
Certainly, and people have all sorts of creative uses for reusing those plastic bags. Now, obviously, if you're buying, produce and you're getting those plastic bags, they do make reusable bags for produce, but if you are getting the plastic bags, use it as a trash can liner or something. Yes?
Yes, I actually asked you this in person before, but about the non-refundable aluminum cans.
Yes.
Aluminum cans, which currently now are getting diverted into the steel can.
That's right.
Stream. And as someone who is a sort of pathological recycler separable, this is anathema to me.
Right.
Remixing the aluminum with the steel. In our disposal stream down the line, is that getting separated from K? Is that
It absolutely, it is getting separated.
Okay.
So when we sell product, and I should explain this with our source separated model, it allows us to sell product individually or depending on markets and labor requirements to mix that. And we've decided to stick with this model and not switch back and forth where, today we want you to do this and tomorrow we want you to do something different, just because the cost and the confusion that go around those re-education campaigns is costly. So right now, yes, we are mixing some of those non-refundable containers back into a mixed stream where eventually, yes, the companies that we sell them to, they separate them out with a usually combination of eddy currents and magnets. They're getting recycled. And the reason that we're doing this is because so many of those containers that were going into those streams were actually refundable. And so we said we can change things a little bit, and surprisingly enough, the refundable bottles that come into the facility, we generate approximately $15,000 to $20,000 a year just from those refundable bottles. So keep on doing it. But more importantly, recycle. But if you want to take them to the supermarket or bottle redemption centers yourself, please do.
So this program, how easy is it to get established in other communities? Is there a sort of a set of preconditions that have to be present?
No, I wouldn't say that there are. You just have to have a willing population and the infrastructure to do it. So, not every facility has a transfer station. Not every community has a transfer station. So if they have curbside collection, that's another truck that's going around, obviously. Right. It's one of the benefits, I think, of having sort of everything at the transfer station. So if you're still coming there one day a week, I recognize that we've got 10,000 vehicles that are coming over the roads per week to come to our facility. And if there's a way of improving that, that's fantastic. But if you're coming through and you're doing all your source separated recycling, you're getting rid of your trash, you're getting rid of your special waste, you're getting rid of your food waste, you're picking up compost, you're picking up salted sand, you're visiting the reusable area, you're visiting the book exchange. There's a lot that you can do at the facility, I think, to make that trip worthwhile.
How many folks work at the RDF? And also, is there any kind of protocol in terms of, it seems there are trucks running all the time, sitting at idle, which is interesting, especially when they ask for the cars to shut down, that you have the trucks running.
Sure. Talk a little bit about that. So including myself, we have 14 employees at the RDF to handle all of the material that's coming through. We do a lot of the hauling ourselves of material, so we'll haul any of the televisions, some of the special waste, some of the recycling as well. We'll haul that out. So our guys aren't all 14 at the facility at the whole time. And we've got obviously the split shifts, so because we're open 6 to 7 days a week, we have a Monday through Friday shift and a Tuesday through Saturday shift. So they don't all overlap at the same time. In terms of the trucks idling, the diesel trucks are required to idle sometimes, and because they're not made to be shut off and turned back on again, it can cause problems with the exhaust system and how they run. So a lot of times you will see trucks idling sort of ready to go so that we can keep them efficiently moving the trash and the waste throughout the operation.
Plus, there's a number of volunteers that supplement the staff, your staff.
That's a great point. Thank you, Priscilla. So
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
there's a volunteer effort that helps substantially. The entire reusable area, take it or leave it, is run through volunteer staff. So there's approximately 35 volunteers
There's about 35 volunteers and active about 20 that have shifts over at the reusable area that's open between April and November. Plus the book stall, there's a set of
That's right.
volunteers that go through the books and make sure that the area is neat. And then we've got the new area facility to be able to ship off books to More Than Words.
More Than Words, that's
The-
right.
The organization that recycles the books and works with children that need some income.
Thank you for pointing that out. That's a lot of volunteer effort.
Kind of ironic about the trucks, is there anything that's being done in terms of replacement on, or improvement on that kind of a vehicle?
In general, yes, because when a truck is running and it's not being used, it's a money loser. So industry-wide, yes, there's sort of competing interests with what the industry wants and what health officials want. So obviously with the emissions improvements is essentially what have been happening to diesel trucks. There's a series of improvements that they've been making to try to reduce the emissions of what comes out of a diesel truck. And that has impact on operations sometimes too. So sometimes the trucks have to be running for longer even though they're reducing the emissions that are entering the atmosphere.
And the yard waste is all recycled back into the town?
Now, the yard waste, there's two different things that happen with the yard waste. There's essentially the leaves and the grass, and then there's the brush. So the leaves and grass is what gets turned into compost that we make available for residents to use at the facility, and we also sell to commercial vendors. The brush gets ground up and hauled out. It's a product that we don't want to offer. It can attract insects and pests, and we don't want that at the facility, and we really don't want to be distributing that throughout town either.
What about smoke detectors? You know, when one is no longer functioning and it says, don't throw these away.
That's right. You should not throw those away. So we have an area, if you're familiar with the mercury shed at the RDF, so there's what's essentially called a special waste area. So after you've made your way through the recycling, on the right side there's paint, there's batteries, propane tanks, televisions and TVs, and there's also a mercury shed. So your fluorescent bulbs, your smoke detectors, your thermometers, all should go in that area.
Can you dispose of sharps there too?
Sharps are one thing that we do not take. Sharps that are available, sharks. We don't take sharks either. Not even in the food waste program. Sharps are, you can get rid of those at the fire department. Also, I believe the Board of Health and CVS, I think, has sharps disposals area at their stores. So there's some options that are available for sharps. Of course, there are other things that we are not permitted to take. We're not permitted to handle hazardous waste, so when we do have hazardous waste day, we have a vendor that's on site for that does all the handling. And we're also not allowed to take ammunitions, explosives, radioactive material, so there's a range of material that we're not permitted to handle.
So what are sharps?
Sharps are needles.
Oh, okay.
And, yes, sorry, technical term. Good question. All right. With that, again, I'll just ask for your participation to please sign up for the program. I think you'll be surprised at how easy it is. And please,
Can we get refill bags over at the RDF? Is that
right now you can get refill bags at the RDF. That is something that we will stop doing.
Okay.
And so we will provide information on how to get those bags yourself and how to still.
Do you have to use that kind of bag? Could you use a little plastic bag to recycle in something like that?
That's a great question because technically for the anaerobic digester model, you don't need compostable bags. It treats it like one of those other contaminants, like a regular plastic bag, and takes it out of the stream. We've maintained the compostable bag because just in case something went wrong with the anaerobic digester, we wanted to be able to still move and move the product and have it either go to a farm or another location that could take it. So we've tried to just maintain a little bit of flexibility during this pilot program, but I'm hopeful that we're comfortable enough with the program going forward and our outlets going forward that we can actually just use any bag. And then the question is, are we just sending a mixed message between, plastic bags are bad, but you can still use them for something good. But I think we're all intelligent enough.
Is there anybody doing more and better?
I'm sorry?
Is there anybody doing more and better, and what are your goals?
Any other entities that are doing better than what we're doing?
RDF, yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the RDF started out as an absolute leader in recycling in this area. Some of you are probably familiar with the Martha Stone story, which is just phenomenal, that she was inspired to create a glass recycling program at the RDF using volunteers from her volunteer and Action for Ecology, the group that she was part of, as well as high school volunteers to try to gather up the glass and deliver it to the Coke plant up on 128, which coincidentally, so the date of that is February 11th, 1971, so we just hit our 48th anniversary of recycling in Wellesley. And also coincidentally, she faced sort of the same exact questions that we're facing with our programs. Like, nobody's going to be willing to do that. Nobody's going to separate out their glass from their trash and bring it to the RDF. But they did it then, so I'm hopeful that everyone will do it now. In terms of other communities that are doing better, you'll certainly find on the West Coast that they're more progressive communities. A lot of them tend to be curbside communities, so they've just been very aggressive on the amount of material that they collect, and they also collect food waste. Portland, Maine has started a curbside collection of their food waste program. And of course, Europe has traditionally just been phenomenal. They have a very high economic interest for doing so. They do not have a lot of land to landfill. So they've, the German method of, again, source separation is where we want to be, and I think that's superior, and so I think we just want to grow with that program.
It's funny, when I was growing up, everybody had a little garbage pail back right outside the back porch.
Same here.
Yeah. And the garbage guy came around every week and picked it all up.
Right.
It was in
Here
the
we
grill.
are going back to that. How much does it cost to participate?
It doesn't cost anything to participate. So these kits were given away free with the help of grant funds.
I see.
And just like any of the programs that are part of the RDF, with the one exception of appliance drop-off, it's all included in your tax base. So this program, again, if we can get 1,000 households participating, it can be less than trash. And if right now we're probably in the neighborhood of about $90 a ton, so we'd really like to get that down. We're paying trash right now $80 a ton, so it's pretty close. And big picture, for the participants that we have now, if we were to extend it year round, we're talking about a cost of about $2,000 more than trash. But we want to be fiscally responsible, so we definitely are doing our best to find ways of getting it as inexpensive as possible. With that, again,Ll thank you, and please sign up. And happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
A little something from
The address was?
Certainly help yourself to some snacks while you're here. Any questions that you might want to say?
169 Great Plain Avenue.